In the summer of 1389, Prince Lazar of Serbia was given a choice: survival or freedom. He was asked to kneel before the Sultan and save his people by becoming a slave, or to fight an army twice his size and face absolute annihilation. He chose annihilation. June 15th, 1389. Kosovo Field, the Field of Blackbirds. This flat, dusty plain in the central Balkans is about to become a graveyard. The air feels heavy, pressing down on the chest. It is a silence that screams. There is no shouting yet, no clashing of steel, just the dry wind moving through the waist-high wheat and the restless shifting of 30,000 men waiting to die. In a few hours, the blackbirds will be the only things moving here. On the northern side of the Lab River stands Prince Lazar Janissary. He is 60 years old, gray-bearded, encased in heavy plate armor that is already heating up under the morning sun. He is the strongest lord left in Serbia. But today, he looks less like a prince and more like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. He looks south. The horizon is vibrating. It starts as a low thrumming in the ground, deeper than thunder. Then comes the sound of the drums. Sultan Murad I has arrived, and he has brought the Ottoman apocalypse with him. 30,000 men, maybe 40,000. It is not a disorganized horde. It is a machine. In the center, the Janissaries, white-capped, fanatical, silent. On the wings, the scythes, elite cavalry hungry for land. In the front, the Akinji raiders, wild men who fight for plunder and terror. They have swallowed Thrace. They have broken Bulgaria. They have erased Macedonia from the map. Now, the machine has stopped at the gates of Serbia. Lazar looks back at his own lines. He has knights, yes, men bred for war, sitting on massive destriers. But behind the knights are the others, thousands of them, farmers, fathers, boys who have never held a weapon heavier than a scythe. They are wearing cloth tunics. They are holding rusted spears and wooden shields that will splinter under the first blow of a warhammer. They are not soldiers. They are the harvest. They are here because Lazar has emptied the villages to build a wall of flesh against the end of the world. The mathematics of this morning are simple and brutal. 2-to-1 odds. Flat terrain. No walls. No high ground. No escape. A rational man would look at that horizon and kneel. He would ride across the river, kiss the Sultan's ring, and agree to pay the tribute. He would live. His men would go home to their harvest. Serbia would become a vassal state, a servant in its own house, but it would survive. But Lazar isn't crossing the river. He is tightening his grip on his sword. He is ordering the standards to be raised, because this isn't a battle for territory. This isn't a dispute over taxes or borders. This is an existential crisis. To the men standing in that field, the Ottoman advance isn't just an invasion. It is the end of time. If the line breaks here, the Balkans break. If the line breaks here, their faith, their names, and their history disappear. Tonight, the prince and the sultan will both be dead. The river will run red for days, and the empire will be gone. But before the slaughter begins, before the assassination that stunned the world, and before the myth that would keep a nation alive for 500 years, we need to understand the choice. Why did a prince choose annihilation over submission? Why did 15,000 farmers agree to stand in an open field and wait for the lightning to strike? History is written by the victors, but the defeated write the legends. As we step onto the field of blackbirds, ask yourself a hard question. If you knew your nation would die today, would you choose to survive as a slave or die as a free man? To understand why a Serbian farmer is standing in a field waiting to die on this June morning, you have to understand the ghost haunting this battlefield. His name was Stefan Dusan. They called him Dusan Silni, Dusan the Mighty. 35 years before Kosovo, Serbia wasn't a victim waiting for the slaughter. It was the apex predator of the Balkans. Dusan was a giant of a man, physically imposing, politically ruthless, and tactically brilliant. He had taken a small, landlocked kingdom and turned it into an empire that stretched from the Danube River all the way to the Gulf of Corinth. He controlled the trade routes that connected east and west. He controlled the silver mines of Novo Brdo, which pumped out enough wealth to hire the best mercenaries in Europe, German heavy knights, Spanish infantry, men who fought for gold and fear. In 1346, on Easter Sunday, Dusan had himself crowned emperor of the Serbs and Greeks. It wasn't an empty title. He held court in Skopje, wearing tiaras modeled after Byzantium, dreaming of the ultimate prize, Constantinople. He terrified the world. The Pope in Rome worried about him. The emperor in Constantinople feared him. The Hungarians to the north built walls to keep him out. Under Dusan, the Serbian nobility was kept on a short leash. They obeyed or they died. The laws were codified in the Dusanov Zakonik, a legal code that was advanced for its time, but enforced with iron. There was order. There was strength. There was a center of gravity. But empires built by strong men have a fatal flaw. They rely entirely on the lungs of one man. On December 20th, 1355, Stefan Dusan died. He was 47 years old. The cause is still debated: poison fever or stroke, but the result was instantaneous. The gravity vanished. The leash snapped. Dusan's son, Uroz, took the throne. History remembers him as Uroz the Weak. He was a boy trying to wear a giant's armor. He couldn't control the generals. He couldn't control the greedy dukes and despots who had been waiting for Dusan to stop breathing. And so the feeding frenzy began. It didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a singular explosion. It was a rotting. The Serbian Empire didn't fall to an invasion. It fell to an argument. The powerful regional lords, the Velikasi, stopped sending taxes to the capital. Then they stopped sending troops. Then they stopped answering letters. Within a decade, the map of the Balkans looked like shattered glass. In the west, the Vojinovic family took what they wanted. In the south, the Mrnjev-Sevic brothers, Vukasin and Ugljeza, carved out their own private kingdoms in Macedonia. In the north, Prince Lazar took the Morava Valley. The Balsic family took the coast. They weren't building a nation. They were stealing the furniture from a burning house. They fought each other with a ferocity they should have saved for the enemy. They burned each other's villages, stole each other's cattle, and blinded each other's messengers. They were so obsessed with being the king of their own little hill that they didn't notice the mountain rising in the east. Because while the Serbs were busy tearing the carcass of Dusan's empire apart, the Ottomans were building a machine. The contrast between the two powers could not have been starker. Serbia was feudal, chaotic, and backward-looking, obsessed with bloodlines and ancient titles. The Ottoman Emirate was new, hungry, and frighteningly modern. They were led by Murad I. Murad was not a raider. He was not a tribal chieftain looking for grazing land. He was an architect of statecraft. He was the first of his line to take the title of Sultan, and he earned it. Murad looked at the chaos of the Balkans and saw an opportunity. He didn't rush. He didn't loot and leave. He conquered and stayed. He understood that to build an eternal empire, you need more than just brave men on horses. You need a system that functions without you. You need a bureaucracy. You need logistics. And most importantly, you need an army that has no loyalty to anyone but the throne. The Serbian lords relied on levies, farmers who would rather be harvesting wheat, and fickle noblemen who might switch sides if the pay wasn't right. The blood tax. Ottoman tax collectors would travel to the Christian villages in the conquered territories. They wouldn't ask for grain or silver. They would ask for children. They took boys, usually between the ages of 8 and 18. The smartest, the strongest, the healthiest. These boys were taken from their families, never to see them again. They were marched to the Ottoman capital. They were converted to Islam. They were given new names, and then they were broken down and rebuilt. They were subjected to years of brutal physical and mental conditioning. They were taught to read and write. They were taught the art of war, archery, musketry, swordsmanship. But mostly they were taught loyalty. They had no parents. The regiment was their father. They had no home. The barracks was their home. They had no God but Allah, and no master but the Sultan. They became the Janissary, the new troops. the Janissaries. They were the first standing army in Europe since Rome. While Serbian knights were practicing for tournaments and drinking wine in their castles, the Janissaries were drilling. They marched in silence. They fought with a discipline that unnerved their enemies. They didn't break, they didn't run, and they didn't ask questions. This was the engine of the Ottoman advance, a military caste created from the stolen sons of the people they were conquering. It was a psychological weapon as much as a physical one. The Ottomans were using the Balkans to conquer the Balkans. By the 1370s, the machine was moving. The Serbian lords, still bickering over the scraps of Dusan's legacy, finally woke up to the threat. But it was too late. In 1371, the Mrnjavčević brothers, the lords of the south, took a massive army to drive the Turks out of Adrianople. It was the largest Serbian force assembled since Dusan's death. But they were arrogant. They were disorganized. They made camp near the Maritsa River and didn't bother to set proper sentries. They got drunk. They fell asleep. In the middle of the night, a much smaller Ottoman force raided the camp. It wasn't a battle, it was a massacre. The Serbian army was butchered in its sleep. The river ran red with the blood of men who died without ever drawing their swords. Both Mrnjavčević brothers were killed. The Battle of Maritsa was the warning bell. It proved that bravery was useless without discipline. It proved that the old way of war was dead. The south collapsed instantly. Macedonia became an Ottoman vassal. The gateway to the heartland was wide open, and standing in that gateway was Prince Lazar. Lazar was different from the other warlords. He wasn't a royal by blood. He was a minor noble who had risen through competence. He had married into the Nemanjic dynasty to gain legitimacy, but he knew he wasn't Dusan. He didn't have the Iron King's authority. He spent the 1380s trying to stitch the wounds of the empire back together. He forged alliances. He married his daughters to the other powerful lords, Vuk Branković in Kosovo, Dured Balsic in Zeta. He tried to create a coalition of the willing. But you cannot rebuild in a few years what took decades to destroy. The trust was gone. The unity was a facade, and Murad knew it. The Sultan watched Lazar's frantic diplomacy with the patience of a wolf watching a wounded deer try to stand up. He knew the Serbs were isolated. He knew they were outnumbered, and he knew their time was up. In the spring of 1389, Murad gathered his Janissaries. He gathered his vassals. He gathered the full weight of the East. He didn't send a raiding party. He sent an extermination force. As the Ottoman army crossed into Serbian territory, burning villages and poisoning wells, the reality settled in. This wasn't a test. This was the final exam. The carcass of the empire had been picked clean. Now, the predators were coming for the bones. In the early spring of 1389, a rider arrived at Prince Lazar's court in Kruševac. He didn't carry a weapon. He didn't come with an army, not yet. He carried a letter. The letter was from Sultan Murad I, and it contained the most dangerous weapon in the Ottoman arsenal, a choice. The terms were simple. They were the same terms Murad had offered to the Bulgarians, the Greeks, and the Macedonians. Prince Lazar, submit to the Sultan. Acknowledge him as your overlord. Pay an annual tribute in silver. Provide 1,000 horsemen to fight in the Sultan's wars whenever called upon. Do this, and you may keep your title. You may keep your lands. You may keep your head. It was a transaction, cold, rational, and precise. Murad wasn't asking for Lazar's life. He was asking for his pride. He was offering a contract. Trade your independence for your survival. To the modern ear, this sounds like slavery. But in the fractured political landscape of the 14th century, it was standard diplomacy. Vassalage was the currency of the realm. Half the rulers in the Balkans had already taken the deal. Marko Kraljevic, the son of the great king Bakasin who died at Maritsa, had bent the knee. He was now an Ottoman vassal. The Dejanovic brothers in the east had submitted. Even the Byzantine emperor in Constantinople, the heir to Rome itself, was paying tribute to the Sultan. These men weren't cowards. They were pragmatists. They looked at the map. They saw the Ottoman machine swallowing city after city. They saw the discipline of the Janissaries and the wealth of the East. And then they looked at their own crumbling walls and empty treasuries. They did the math. Fighting meant annihilation. It meant your cities burned, your sons taken for the Janissary Corps, and your head on a pike. Submission meant you lived to fight another day. It meant your people didn't starve. It meant continuity. So when Lazar held that letter in his hands, his advisors likely urged him to sign it. Why die for pride? They would have whispered. Why risk the entire nation on a roll of the dice? Sign the paper. Pay the silver. Wait for the Sultan to die. Then rebuild. It was the logical choice. It was the safe choice. But Lazar didn't sign it. This decision is the pivot point of Serbian history. It is the moment where the timeline splits. Later generations, the poets, the priests, the nationalists, would turn this decision into a religious parable. They called it the choice between the earthly kingdom and the heavenly kingdom. According to the myth, the prophet Elijah visited Lazar in the form of a gray falcon. He offered the prince a choice: defeat the Turks and rule a great Serbian empire on earth, or be defeated and gain the kingdom of heaven, to be a martyr. He rejected him because he understood the true cost of the transaction. He looked at what had happened to the other vassals. Marko Kraljevic was a king in name, but in reality, he was an Ottoman servant. He was forced to march his armies against his own Christian neighbors to expand the Sultan's power. He was forced to watch as his culture was slowly eroded, his laws replaced, and his legacy erased. Lazar realized that submission wasn't survival. It was a slow death. If he signed that paper, the Serbian identity, the legacy of the Nemanjic dynasty, the Orthodox faith, the memory of Dusan, would be hollowed out from the inside. They would become fuel for the Ottoman engine. Lazar looked at the letter. He looked at his sons, and he realized that some things are more expensive than blood. He sent the messenger back to Murad. The answer is no. It was a declaration of war against the greatest power in the known world. The reaction from the Ottoman camp was immediate. Murad didn't negotiate. He didn't send a second letter. He mobilized the army. And in Serbia, the panic set in. Lazar knew he couldn't fight the Ottomans alone. He needed a coalition. He sent riders to every corner of the Balkans. He appealed to Tvrtko I, the king of Bosnia. Tvrtko was a rival, but he was also a realist. He knew that if Serbia fell, Bosnia was next. He sent his best general, Vlatko Vukovic, with a heavy detachment of Bosnian cavalry. Lazar appealed to his son-in-law, Vuk Brankovic, the lord of the district of Brankovic, the land we now call Kosovo. Vuk was powerful, ambitious, and proud. He had every reason to sit this one out, to let Lazar take the blow and then pick up the pieces. But the threat was too big. The Ottomans were coming for his land first. Vuk answered the call, but allies weren't enough. Lazar needed bodies. He issued the General Mobilization Order. It went out to every village, every mine, every market town in the Morava Valley. Whoever is a Serb and of Serbian birth, and of Serbian blood and heritage, and comes not to the Battle of Kosovo, may he never have the progeny his heart desires, neither son nor daughter. May nothing grow that his hand sows, neither dark wine nor white wheat, and let him be cursed from all ages to all ages. This wasn't a recruitment poster. It was a curse. It stripped the decision down to its bones. If you don't fight, you don't belong. And so they came. This is the part of the story that often gets lost in the descriptions of kings and knights. The mobilization of the peasantry. Lazar didn't just empty the garrisons. He emptied the fields. Imagine the scene in a village near Križevac. It is May. The wheat is waist high. The harvest is only a month away. A herald arrives in the square. He reads the prince's curse. The men look at each other. They know what this means. If they go, the harvest will rot in the fields. Their families will starve in the winter. If they stay, they are cursed, and the Turks will burn the fields anyway. There is no good choice. So the blacksmith puts down his hammer. The farmer puts down his plow. They go into their barns and pull out whatever they can find. A wood axe, a rusted spear head that they attach to a fresh pole, a heavy knife used for slaughtering pigs. They have no armor. Maybe a padded jacket made of layers of linen and wool. Maybe a boiled leather cap. Certainly not steel. Steel is for the nobility. They say goodbye to their wives. They look at their children one last time. They know, with a terrible clarity, that they are not walking toward glory. They are walking toward a meat grinder. They are the currency Lazar is using to pay for his defiance. He is spending his population to buy a chance at freedom. By early June, the columns of men were moving south. It wasn't a polished army. It was a migration of the desperate. The knights rode in front, their armor gleaming, their banners snapping in the wind. The double-headed eagle of the Nemanjic, the boar's head of the Lazarevic. They looked magnificent. But behind them tramped thousands of men in dusty tunics, smelling of sweat and fear. They marched through the valleys, past the monasteries where monks were already praying for their souls. They converged on the designated meeting point, the field near the junction of the Lab and Sitnica rivers. Lazar rode among them. He saw their faces. He knew the numbers. He had scraped the bottom of the barrel. He had roughly 15,000 to 20,000 men. Across the border, moving with the inexorable slow-motion weight of a glacier. Murad had 40,000. The transaction had been rejected. The contract had been torn up. Now the debt would be collected in iron. As the Serbian army set up camp on the night of June 14th, the reality of the situation began to settle in. The fires of the Ottoman camp were visible in the distance. There were so many of them that the chroniclers say they looked like a reflection of the starry sky on the earth. Lazar stood in the dark, watching those fires. He had made the moral choice. He had made the heavenly choice. But as he looked at the thousands of farmers sleeping on the cold ground, clutching their rusted weapons, he must have wondered if he had just led his entire people into a slaughterhouse. The time for diplomacy was over. The time for mathematics had begun. Night falls on June 14th. The Serbian camp settles into a restless, jagged silence. 15,000 men are trying to sleep on the cold ground, knowing that the sun will bring either liberation or death. But inside the command tent of Prince Lazar, there is no sleep. There's only a suffocating weight in the air. A coalition army is a dangerous thing. It is not a single body with a single brain. It is a collection of rival egos, old grudges, and suppressed ambitions, loosely tied together by a common enemy. Lazar had managed to bring the lords of Serbia together, but he hadn't managed to make them like each other. To his right sat Vuk Brankovic. Vuk was the lord of this land. Kosovo was his territory. He was a man of immense power and even greater pride. He had married Lazar's daughter, Mara, which technically made him family. But in the cutthroat world of Balkan politics, family often just means you get stabbed from a closer distance. Vuk was jealous. He resented the influence of the other knights. He resented the fact that Lazar, a man of lower birth, commanded the army. And most of all, he resented Miloš Obilic. Miloš Obilic is the enigma of this story. Depending on which chronicle you believe, he was either a noble of high birth or a commoner who had risen through sheer violence and skill. What is certain is that he was the greatest warrior in the Serbian ranks. He was the founder of the Order of the Dragon, a brotherhood of knights sworn to defend the cross. He was Lazar's son-in-law, having married another of the prince's daughters. This made him Vuk Brankovic's brother-in-law, and Vuk hated him. For weeks leading up to the battle, a poison had been seeping into Lazar's ear. It was a whisper carried by spies and jealous rivals. Someone has turned. Someone is talking to the Sultan. Someone has taken the Ottoman gold. Paranoia is a weapon. The Ottomans knew this. Their intelligence network was vast. They would often plant rumors in enemy camps, letting suspicion run the chain of command from inside. By the night of June 14th, the rumors had coalesced around a single name, Miloš Obilic. Vuk Brankovic had assured Lazar that Miloš was a traitor. He claimed that Miloš planned to defect the moment the battle began, taking his knights with him to join the Sultan. Lazar didn't want to believe it. Miloš was his champion, but Lazar was also a prince staring at an apocalypse. Under that kind of pressure, the mind cracks. Doubt creeps in. You start to look at your closest friends and see knives in their hands. That night, Lazar held a final war council. It has gone down in history as the Last Supper of Kosovo. The table was set with silver goblets and heavy plates. The candles burned low. The captains of the army sat in a circle. Lazar Vuk Brankovic, Vlatko Vukovic of Bosnia, and Miloš Obilic. The mood wasn't one of camaraderie. It was a tribunal. Lazar stood up. He held a golden goblet filled with wine. He looked around the table, meeting the eyes of the men who held the fate of Serbia in their hands. He stopped at Miloš. The silence in the tent was absolute. The wind outside seemed to stop. Lazar spoke. His voice was heavy with sadness. "I drink to you, my lords," he began, "to the brave, to the faithful." Then he turned his body fully toward Obilic. "But if I drink to loyalty, I drink to you, Miloš. And if I drink to treason, I drink to you, Miloš." The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Lazar continued, his voice hardening. "Drink this wine, Miloš. Take this cup from my hand. Drink to your health and to your betrayal. Even though you will leave me tomorrow for the Sultan, I drink to you." It was a devastating public shaming. In the feudal code of honor, an accusation of treason was a death sentence. It stripped a man of his name, his lands, and his soul. For a knight like Miloš, whose entire existence was built on reputation, this was worse than a sword through the gut. The other lords watched. Vuk Brankovic likely smirked in the shadows, thinking his rival was finished. Miloš Obilic stood up. He didn't draw his sword. He didn't shout. He didn't overturn the table. He took the goblet from Lazar's hand. He drank the wine. Then he set the cup down with a deliberate, metallic clink. "Prince Lazar," Miloš said, his voice level and cold, "I thank you for the wine. I thank you for the toast. But I do not thank you for the doubt." He looked around the table, locking eyes with Vuk Brankovic. "Tomorrow," Miloš said, "is St. Vitus Day. Tomorrow on the field of Kosovo, everything will be clear. Tomorrow we will see who is faithful and who is the traitor." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle on them. "I swear to you, by God Almighty," Miloš continued, "that I will not betray you. Instead, I will do what no other man here dares to do. I will ride into the Ottoman camp, and I will kill Sultan Murad." He didn't wait for a response. He turned and walked out of the tent into the darkness. Lazar stood there, the empty goblet in his hand. The accusation had backfired. Instead of exposing a traitor, he had pushed his greatest warrior into a suicide pact. Outside the tent, Miloš Obilic walked through the sleeping camp. His mind was racing. He knew he couldn't just fight in the battle now. Fighting wasn't enough. Killing 10 Turks, or 20, or 100 wasn't enough. The stain on his honor was too deep. To cleanse it, he had to do something impossible. He had to cut the head off the snake. He went to his horse, a massive charger named Zdralin. He checked the girth. He checked his weapons. He sharpened his dagger. He wasn't planning a battle anymore. He was planning an execution. Inside the command tent, the dinner broke up. The lords went back to their units. Vuk Brankovic returned to his post on the right flank, satisfied that he had zoned out, but perhaps uneasy about the look in Miloš's eyes. Lazar remained alone. He prayed. He looked at the map. He thought about the man he had just accused. The tragedy of the supper of spies wasn't just the mistrust. It was the distraction. While the Serbian high command was tearing itself apart over rumors and jealousy, across the river, the Ottoman camp was a machine of perfect unity. Sultan Murad wasn't toasting to treason. He was sleeping. His commanders knew their orders. His Janissaries were sharpening their blades in silence. There was no politics in the Ottoman camp that night. Only purpose. The Serbs were fighting two enemies, the Turks and themselves. As the sun began to bleed into the sky on the morning of June 15th, Miloš Obilic mounted his horse. He didn't join the line with the other knights. He positioned himself slightly apart. He wasn't waiting for the order to charge. He was waiting for his moment. The supper was over. The talking was done. The time for wine had passed. Now it was time for blood. The sun is fully up now. It is burning off the morning mist, revealing the stage where the tragedy will be performed. The terrain of Kosovo Field is deceptively simple. It is a trap disguised as a field. To the north and west, the mountains rise up like walls. But the valley floor itself is flat, undulating slightly near the confluence of the Lab and Sitnik rivers. There is no cover. There are no forests to hide an ambush. There are no narrow passes to bottle up numbers. It is a killing floor designed by nature. Lazar has chosen his ground carefully. Or perhaps he had no choice at all. He has deployed his army on the higher ground, hoping that the slope will give his heavy cavalry the momentum they need to shatter the enemy line. The Serbian formation is traditional. It is a line of steel stretched thin to prevent encirclement. In the center stands Prince Lazar. Around him are the elite knights of the Morava Valley, men encased in Milanese plate armor, riding horses draped in heavy caparisons. This is the heart of the army, the Iron Fist. On the right flank, down near the riverbank, stands Vuk Brankovic with his knights. He holds the most prestigious position after the prince, a sign that perhaps Lazar was trying to buy his loyalty with honor. On the left flank stands Vlatko Vukovic and the Bosnian contingent. These are huge men, mountain fighters sent by King Tvrtko. They are fresh. They are eager. But behind this wall of steel stands the infantry, the 15,000 farmers we spoke of. They are nervous. They are gripping their spears with sweaty hands, squinting against the sun. They know that if the knights fail, there is nothing standing between them and the Ottoman swords. Across the field, the Ottoman deployment is a mirror image, but on a terrifying scale. Sultan Murad commands the center. He is surrounded by the Janissaries. They do not move. They do not speak. They stand in perfect white rows, holding their composite bows. They are the anchor. On the Ottoman right is Bayezid, the Sultan's eldest son. He commands the European levies and the Rumelian cavalry. He is known for his temper and his speed. On the Ottoman left is Yakub, the younger son. He commands the Anatolian troops. The disparity between the two armies is not just in numbers, though the numbers are bad enough. 30,000 against 15,000. 2 men for every 1 Serb. The real disparity is in the nature of the force. The Serbian army is a relic of the past. It is built around the heavy knight, the individual hero, the tank of the medieval world. It relies on the shock of the charge. It is an army designed for glory. The Ottoman army is a machine designed for efficiency. It relies on combined arms. The archers soften the enemy. The irregulars tire them out. The cavalry flanks them. And the Janissaries finish them. It is an industrial approach to killing. But there is something even darker about the Ottoman line, something that makes the blood of the Serbian defenders run cold. If you look closely at the banners flying above the Ottoman ranks, you don't just see the crescent moon. You see Christian crosses. Standing there, shoulder to shoulder with the Janissaries, are Serbs, and Bulgarians, and Greeks. These are the vassals. The men who took the deal Lazar refused. Konstantin Dejanovic is there. He is a Serbian lord, a cousin to the men he is about to fight. He isn't there because he hates Lazar. He is there because he signed a contract. This is the true tragedy of empire. It creates a world where loyalty is a legal obligation, not a moral one. Imagine the psychological horror of that moment. You are a Serbian knight in Lazar's line. You look across the field, and you recognize the shield of a man you drank wine with at a tournament 3 years ago. You see the banner of a cousin. You see the face of a friend. And you know that in an hour, you will have to kill him. The Ottomans have weaponized the Balkans against itself. They have turned the region into a snake eating its own tail. This is the ultimate test of transaction we spoke of earlier. Konstantin Dejanovic honored his contract. He kept his lands. He kept his head. But the price is that he must stand in this field and watch his own people be destroyed, and then help the destroyers do it. It raises a question that haunts every civil war and every occupation in history. If you were forced to fight your own kin to honor a contract, would you hold the line or turn your coat? If the safety of your children depended on you killing your countrymen, could you do it? The sun climbs higher. The heat begins to radiate off the ground. The horses are foaming. The men are dehydrating in their armor. The silence breaks. It doesn't start with a charge. It starts with a sound like tearing silk. The Ottoman archers, thousands of them, draw their bows. They angle them upward. They are not aiming at anything specific. They are aiming at the area code. The sky darkens. It isn't a figure of speech. For a few seconds, the sun is actually blocked out by a cloud of ash wood and iron. The battle has begun, and the geometry of death is about to solve itself. The battle begins with the sound of tearing silk. It is a dry snapping noise that starts on the Ottoman side of the field and rolls across the dry grass like a wave. It is the sound of 10,000 bowstrings releasing at the exact same fraction of a second. The sky changes color. To the men standing in the Serbian front lines, the farmers in their linen tunics, the miners with their rusted axes, it looks like a storm cloud has suddenly materialized out of the clear blue air. But clouds don't move that fast. It is a roof of ash wood and iron. The Ottoman composite bow is a masterpiece of engineering. Made of horn, wood, and sinew, it has a pull weight that can drive a bodkin point through chainmail at 100 yards. Against unarmored peasants, it is not a weapon of war. It is an industrial tool for harvesting. The volley hits. There is no glorious clash of swords yet. There is only the wet, sickening thud of iron striking flesh. Thousands of arrows slam into the Serbian infantry. Men drop where they stand. They don't fall heroically. They just crumble, pinned to the earth by shafts of wood. A father from Kosovo looks down to find an arrow protruding from his chest, and before his brain can register the pain, a second arrow takes him in the throat. The front ranks of the Serbian army are dissolving. This is the cruelty of medieval warfare. The levies, the men who have the least to gain from the victory, pay the highest price. They have no shields large enough to cover themselves. They have no plate armor to deflect the blow. They are standing naked in a rain of steel. Panic begins to ripple through the lines. You can see it in the way the formation wavers. Men are stepping back, trying to put someone else between themselves and the archers. The discipline is fraying. If they stand here for another 10 minutes, there will be no army left to fight. They will break and run, and the Ottoman light cavalry will hunt them down like rabbits. Prince Lazar, watching from the center, knows he has run out of time. He cannot win a shooting war. He cannot outweight the Sultan. He has only one card to play. It is the same card European commanders have been playing for 200 years. The heavy cavalry charge, the iron fist. Lazar signals the trumpeters. The brass notes cut through the screams of the dying. The Serbian knights lower their visors. These are not the farmers. These are the Vlastila, the nobility. They are encased in the finest steel money can buy Milanese and Venetian plate armor, articulated to allow movement, but thick enough to stop an arrow. They sit on massive destriers, horses bred specifically for violence, draped in heavy caparisons of velvet and mail. They are the tanks of the 14th century. The line begins to move. At first it is a slow trot. The earth shakes. The sound of thousands of hooves beating the dry ground creates a low-frequency vibration that you feel in your teeth before you hear it with your ears. Then the gallop. The Serbian wedge aims not at the center, where the Janissaries stand behind stakes, but at the Ottoman flanks, specifically the Ottoman left wing, commanded by the Sultan's younger son, Yakub. The Ottoman archers try to shift their aim, but it is too late. The distance is closing too fast. The collision is physics in its most brutal form. Mass times acceleration. The Serbian knights smash into the Ottoman lines with the force of a landslide. The first rank of the Ottoman defense, the Akinji skirmishers, simply evaporates. These light troops are trampled, broken, and tossed aside by the weight of the war horses. The knights drive deeper. Lances shatter on impact, turning into jagged splinters of wood. The knights draw their swords, heavy, two-handed blades designed to crush helmets and break bones. They are fighting with the desperate fury of men who know there is no retreat. On the left flank, Vlatko Vukovic and his Bosnian heavy cavalry are doing the same. They are tearing into the Ottoman formations like wolves in a sheep pen. The Ottoman left wing begins to buckle. Yakub's Anatolian troops are tough, experienced fighters, but they are not equipped to stop a heavy cavalry charge on flat ground. They are being pushed back. The formation is compressing. The men are tripping over each other, unable to swing their weapons in the crush. The Serbian wedge is acting like a chisel, hammering itself deep into the enemy block. For the first hour of the battle, it looks like the gamble has paid off. The old way of war, the brute force of the armored knight, seems to be crushing the new way of the Ottoman machine. Reports are flying back to the Ottoman command tent. The left is collapsing. Yakub is overwhelmed. The Serbs are pushing toward the center. To the Serbian commanders, this looks like victory. They can see the Ottoman banners wavering. They can see the panic in the eyes of the enemy infantry. They are cutting through the lines with terrifying ease. The knights are shouting for Christ and for Lazar. They are drunk on the adrenaline of the breakthrough. They believe they have broken the back of the Sultan's army. But a cavalry charge is not a continuous wave. It is a pulse. It hits, it destroys, and then inevitably it stops. Physics demands it. No horse, no matter how strong, can gallop over a mountain of dead bodies forever. As the momentum of the initial Serbian shock wears off, the battle shifts phases. It transforms from a collision into a crush. The iron fist gets stuck in the dense mass of the Ottoman line. The knights are no longer galloping. They're fighting at a standstill, and a stationary knight is a vulnerable knight. The Ottoman infantry, the Azabs, swarm around the stalled horses like ants attacking a beetle. They carry long hooks and glaives designed for exactly this moment. They hook the edges of the Serbian shields. They hook the stirrups. They drag the knights from their saddles and into the mud. Once a man in full plate armor is on the ground, surrounded by 5 enemies with daggers. His expensive Milanese steel becomes his coffin. The dagger of mercy, the misericord, is slipped through the ice slits of the visor or into the armpit. The screaming changes pitch. It isn't the roar of the charge anymore. It is the frantic, claustrophobic shouting of men dying inside tin cans. Yet, despite the stalling in the center, the illusion of victory persists. On the Serbian left flank, the Bosnian contingent under Vlatko Vukovic is performing a miracle. These are mountain men, hardened by years of fighting in the rough terrain of the Dinaric Alps. They have smashed the Ottoman irregulars and are grinding the Ottoman right wing backward step by step. Vlatko is so convinced of his success that he actually dispatches a messenger in the middle of the fighting. The rider breaks out of the chaos and gallops north toward Bosnia. The message he carries to King Tvrtko is simple and joyous. We have won. The Ottoman army is breaking. The Christian lands are saved. King Tvrtko will receive this message days later. He will celebrate. He will send letters to the courts of Europe, to Vienna, to Paris, to Florence, announcing the great victory of Christendom. The bells of Notre Dame in Paris will ring in honor of the Serbian triumph. That is the heartbreaking irony of Kosovo. The world celebrated a victory while the army lay dead in the grass. Because back on the field, the reality is far darker. The Serbs have pushed forward, yes, but they haven't broken the line. They have simply compressed it. The Ottoman center acts like a sponge, absorbing the blow, bleeding, but not tearing. Lazar, fighting in the center, wipes the sweat and dust from his eyes. He looks for the break. He looks for the moment the enemy turns and runs. But they don't run. For every Ottoman soldier the Serbs cut down, another steps forward from the reserves to take his place. It feels like fighting the tide. The sheer depth of the Ottoman manpower reserves begins to tell. The Serbian knights are exhausted. Their arms feel like lead. Their breath comes in ragged gasps inside their helmets. The heat of the June sun is baking them alive. And then, the dust clears just enough to reveal the truth. The Ottoman Janissaries haven't even drawn their swords yet. They're still standing there, fresh, rested, and waiting. The Serbian offensive has spent its energy striking the shield. Now the shield is lowering, and the sword is raised. The false hope evaporates. The realization hits Lazar like a physical blow. He has thrown his best men at the enemy, and the enemy is still standing. And on the right flank, the ground begins to shake again. Not from a Serbian charge this time, from the Ottoman counterattack. The trap is sprung. The thunderbolt is about to strike. While the Serbian knights are drowning in the crush of the center, the battle on the flanks shifts gears. On the Ottoman right wing, Prince Bayezid has been watching. They call him Yildirim, the Thunderbolt. It is a nickname earned not just for his speed in moving armies, but for the sudden, violent volatility of his temper. He is not a patient man like his father. He does not believe in slow strangulation. He believes in the hammer blow. Bayezid sees what the Serbian commanders do not. He sees the separation. The Serbian heavy cavalry, the nobility, the armor, the strength, has pushed too far forward. They have left the infantry behind. The iron fist has detached itself from the arm. Bayezid makes a decision that defines his legacy. He ignores the knights. He realizes he doesn't need to kill the men in plate armor to win the battle. He just needs to kill the army around them. He raises his mace. He signals the reserve cavalry, and he unleashes the thunderbolt. He strikes the Serbian infantry, the exposed, unarmored farmers who were left standing in the dust when the knights charged. It is not a battle. It is an execution. The Serbian levies are exhausted from the arrow storm. They are terrified, and now they are being charged by fresh Ottoman cavalry. Bayezid's horsemen crash into the ranks of the peasantry. There is no resistance. Wooden shields shatter. Cloth tunics offer no protection against curved sabers. The formation disintegrates instantly. Bayezid rides through the chaos like a wolf in a sheep pen. He is cutting the legs out from under the Serbian army. He is destroying the future of the nation, the fathers, the sons, the workers, while the Serbian nobility is busy fighting a stalemate 100 yards away. The knights in the center hear the screaming behind them. They turn their heads. They see their support collapsing. They see the Ottoman banners swarming over their rear. The trap has snapped shut. But as the Serbian army begins to die, one man decides to change the script. Miloš Obilić has been waiting for this moment. He is positioned near the center. He sees the lines buckling. He sees the panic spreading. Most men in his position would be thinking about how to escape or how to sell their lives dearly in the shield wall. Miloš is thinking about dinner. He is thinking about the cup of wine Lazar handed him. He is thinking about the accusation of treason that is still burning in his gut like acid. If I drink to treason, I drink to you, Miloš. He realizes that there is no way to win this battle with swords. The mathematics are too heavy. The enemy is too strong. But an army is a body, and a body dies if you cut off the head. Miloš spurs his horse. The massive charger's drawn. He breaks out of the Serbian line, but he doesn't ride toward the Turks with his sword raised. He reverses his lance. He points the spear tip toward the ground and the butt end toward the sky. In the universal language of medieval warfare, this means one thing: I surrender. He rides straight toward the Ottoman center. He rides toward the Janissaries. The Ottoman skirmishers see him coming. They see the crest on his shield, the dragon. They know who this is. This is a high-value target, a Serbian lord. They don't shoot him. They lower their spears. They think the rumors were true. They think the Serbian morale is breaking. Here is a noble deserter coming to bend the knee to the Sultan, probably to save his own lands before the slaughter becomes total. Miloš rides through the enemy lines. He is deep in the belly of the beast. Thousands of eyes are watching him. If he flinches, if he reaches for his sword handle, he is dead. He keeps his hands visible. He keeps his head high. He rides all the way to the Sultan's inner circle. Sultan Murad I is there. Accounts differ on exactly where. Some say he was seated on his horse, surveying the crushing victory his son was delivering. Others say he was resting in his tent, confident that the day was won. It doesn't matter. The distance is closed. Miloš dismounts. 2 Ottoman guards step forward to intercept him. They grab his arms, checking for weapons. But in the chaos of the battle, with the noise of the dying filling the air, the search is hasty. Or perhaps Miloš had hidden the dagger in a place no guard would check, inside his boot or sewn into the lining of his tunic. He tells them he has vital intelligence. He tells them he has secrets from Lazar's war council. They bring him to the Sultan. Miloš Obilić kneels. This is the moment, the transaction. He is trading his life for his honor. Murad looks down at the Serbian knight. He extends his hand, or perhaps his foot, for the customary kiss of submission. Miloš lunges. It happens so fast that history struggles to record the mechanics of it. One moment, he is a kneeling suppliant. The next, he is a coil of violence springing upward. He pulls the dagger. He does a slash, he stabs. He drives the blade into the Sultan's chest. Once, twice. The force of the blow rips through the Sultan's kaftan and pierces the heart. Murad gasps. The architect of the empire, the man who redesigned the Balkans, looks at his killer with widening eyes. Then the guards are on him. Miloš does not try to escape. There is no escape. He fights, of course, he is a warrior to the end, but he is hacked to pieces within seconds. Scimitars cut him down. Axes break his bones. He dies in a pool of his own blood, mixed with the blood of the emperor he just murdered. But he dies smiling. He has washed the stain from his name. He has answered Lazar's toast. Silence ripples outward from the Sultan's position. The Janissaries nearest to the body stare in horror. The Sultan is down. The shadow of God on earth is dead. In 1389, an army is not a national institution. It is the personal property of the monarch. When the owner dies, the contract is void. Panic begins to spark in the eyes of the commanders. Who do we follow? Do we retreat? Is the battle over? If the news spreads, the Ottoman army will dissolve. The Serbs will win by default. But the news doesn't spread, because the thunderbolt is watching. Bayezid is summoned from the right flank. He rides into the center, his armor splattered with the blood of Serbian farmers. He sees his father's body. He sees the mangled corpse of Miloš. He knows that in the Ottoman succession tradition, the death of a sultan is the starting gun for a civil war. He has a brother, Jakub, who is commanding the left wing. Jakub is popular. Jakub has troops loyal to him. If Jakub finds out the sultan is dead, he might claim the throne. The army will split. The Serbs will counterattack. The empire will fall. Bayezid makes a choice that is colder than any winter wind. He orders his father's body to be covered. He orders the guards to stay silent on pain of death. Then, he sends a messenger to the left wing. Go to my brother Jakub. Bayezid says, tell him our father wishes to speak with him. Tell him it is urgent. The messenger rides. Jakub is fighting hard on the left. He is holding the line against the Bosnian heavy cavalry. When he gets the message, he assumes it is a tactical update. Perhaps the Sultan wants to congratulate him. Perhaps he needs to redeploy. Jakub rides to the center. He dismounts. He enters the command tent. He expects to see his father. Instead, he sees Bayezid standing in the shadows. And behind the tent flap, he sees the bowstring. The executioners are waiting. They strangle Jakub before he can ask a question. He dies without knowing his father is dead. He dies without knowing he was a candidate for the throne. It is fratricide on the battlefield. It is ruthless. It is biblical in its cruelty. But it saves the empire. Bayezid steps out of the tent. He is now the sole sultan. There is no rival. There is no confusion. He looks at the Janissaries. He tells them the sultan is wounded, but the orders remain. Forward. The crisis of command lasted maybe 20 minutes. In that time, Bayezid secured the throne, eliminated his competitor, and rallied the army. The Serbs, who are still dying the crush, have no idea what just happened. They don't know that Miloš succeeded. They don't know the Sultan is dead. They only know that the pressure against them is increasing. Bayezid takes command of the center. He is fueled by a terrifying new energy. He has just killed his brother. He has just lost his father. He has crossed a moral event horizon from which there is no return. He unleashes the reserves. The Serbian knights, who were hoping for a collapse, suddenly find themselves facing a wall of fresh, angry steel. The false hope is gone. The head of the Ottoman snake has been cut off, but a new, more venomous head has grown back instantly. The thunderbolt strikes the center of the Serbian line with everything he has left, and the collapse begins. It is now late afternoon. The sun has moved across the sky, turning the shadows long and thin. The heat is oppressive, a suffocating blanket of dust and humidity that makes every breath feel like inhaling broken glass. On the field of Kosovo, the geometry of the battle has shifted again. For the first 4 hours, it was a collision of lines. Two walls of steel pushing against each other. But now the lines are gone. The battle has become a circle. Bayezid's counterattack has shattered the Serbian unity. By destroying the infantry and stabilizing the center, he has created a killing pocket. The Ottoman wings are folding inward, wrapping around the exhausted Serbian knights like the petals of a carnivorous flower closing at night. In the center, Prince Lazar is still fighting. His horse was killed hours ago. He is on foot, wielding a sword that is notched and dull from hitting too many helmets. He looks to his left, the Bosnian heavy cavalry. The men who had fought so bravely in the morning are being forced back toward the river. They are isolated. He looks to his right, and he sees the end of Serbia. Vuk Brankovic is moving, but he is not moving toward the enemy. He is moving away. On the right flank, the banners of the House of Brankovic, the most powerful lord in the coalition, the master of this very soil, are turning around. The trumpets are signaling the retreat. 12,000 armored men, the only fresh reserve Lazar had left, are riding off the field. History has spent 500 years debating this moment. The folk singers, the blind bards who kept the memory of Kosovo alive in the villages, call Vuk Brankovic the Judas of Kosovo. They sing that he had a secret deal with the Sultan, that he sold his prince for a promise of safety. They paint him as a man of supreme moral rot, a villain who watched his father-in-law die so he could inherit the ash heap. Modern historians offer a colder, perhaps more terrifying explanation. They argue that Vuk wasn't a traitor. He was a calculator. He saw the center collapsing. He saw the Ottoman reserves pouring in. He realized that the battle was mathematically lost. To stay meant that every single armed man in his district would die. To leave meant saving his army to fight another day, to protect his own castles, his own family. It was the ultimate act of medieval pragmatism. He chose the survival of his fiefdom over the survival of his soul. But to the men dying in the center, the distinction doesn't matter. They don't see a tactical withdrawal. They see a hole in the world where their allies used to be. They see the Ottoman cavalry pouring through the gap, Vuk left behind, flanking them, cutting off their escape route. The morale of the Serbian army snaps. It isn't a rout. You cannot rout when you are surrounded. It is a collapse. The Ottoman ring tightens. The space the Serbs occupy gets smaller and smaller. It becomes a crush. Men are pressed so tightly together they cannot lift their weapon arms. They are stabbed by Ottoman daggers, beaten by maces, pulled down by the sheer weight of numbers. This is the kill zone. It is the destruction of a generation. The nobility of the Morava Valley dies here. The flower of the aristocracy, the men who traced their lineage back to the Nemanja kings, are butchered in the mud. There are no ransoms today. Bayezid has given no orders to take prisoners for profit. Today the currency is death. And around the knights, the last of the farmers die. The levies who survived the morning arrow storm, who survived the initial charges, are now trapped in the final pocket. They fight with the desperation of cornered animals. They use rocks, teeth, broken spear shafts. But the machine is relentless. The Janissaries advance in step. Thrust, step, thrust, step. They are harvesting the last of the resistance. Somewhere in that circle, the banner of Prince Lazar goes down. We do not know exactly how he was taken. Some legends say his horse fell into a wolf trap. Others say he was overwhelmed by a swarm of Janissaries, who dragged him to the earth by his cloak. What we do know is that he didn't die in the fighting. The battle noise begins to fade, replaced by the groans of the wounded and the shouting of Ottoman officers restoring order. The prince is bound. His armor is stripped off. He is bleeding, exhausted, covered in the dust of his own kingdom. He is dragged toward the Ottoman command tent. The scene that follows is one of the most macabre tableaus in history. It is a scene that belongs in a Greek tragedy, not a military report. Lazar is brought into the presence of the Sultan, but the Sultan is dead. Murad's body has been laid out on a carpet, or perhaps a makeshift bier. His chest is still bloody from Milošo Bilik's dagger. His eyes are closed. Standing over the corpse is Bayezid. The new Sultan is covered in gore. He is vibrating with the adrenaline of the massacre and the cold power of his new title. Lazar looks at the body of his enemy. He looks at the son who has just destroyed his army. There is no negotiation. There's no offer of vassalage now. That transaction was rejected days ago. Bayezid looks at the man who ordered the assassination of his father. The order is given. A Janissary executioner steps forward. He kicks the prince to his knees. Lazar Hrebljanovic, the last hope of the Serbian Empire, kneels in the dirt. He does not beg. He likely prays. He has made his choice for the heavenly kingdom. And now the bill has come due. The blade falls. Lazar's head is severed. It rolls onto the ground, coming to rest near the feet of the dead sultan. Two kings, both dead, both lying on the same patch of bloody earth in the middle of nowhere. The symbolism is crushing. The old order of the Balkans, the Christian nobility, the legacy of Rome, the independent kingdoms, has been decapitated. And the new order, the Ottoman centralized state, the rule of the Sultan, has been baptized in blood. Outside the tent, the sun finally sets. The silence returns to Kosovo Field, but it is not the silence of the morning. It is the heavy, wet silence of a graveyard. 30,000 men lie dead or dying in an area no bigger than a few square miles. The Lab River is choked with bodies. The water runs pink, then red, then black as the light fails. The blackbirds, for whom the field is named, finally descend. The feast has begun. The Serbian army is not just defeated. It is erased. There is no one left to defend the capital. There is no one left to man the walls of Kosovo. There is no one left to harvest the wheat. The withdrawal of Vuk Brankovic saved his own life, but it condemned the nation to a slow, suffocating twilight. As the moon rises, Bayezid orders the preparations for departure. The Ottoman army is battered. They have lost their sultan. They have lost thousands of their best troops. They cannot continue the campaign of conquest this year. They must return to Adrianople to secure Bayezid's throne against rivals. Technically, the battle is a draw. Both armies are destroyed. Both leaders are dead. The invaders are retreating. But in strategic terms, it is the most decisive victory in the history of the region, because the Ottomans have vast reserves in Anatolia. They can grow new soldiers. They can build new armies. Serbia has spent everything. It has fired its last bullet. It has no reserves. It has no sons left to grow. The slaughter is over. But the long night of the Balkans is just beginning. Bayezid calculates. He makes his choice in the silence of a tent. He orders the execution of the captive Prince Lazar and moves to secure his own throne. The assassination of Sultan Murad by Milošević has achieved its goal. It has traded a life for an eternal legend. The world, still reeling from the Bosnian report of a victory, will not know the true cost of this day for generations. But the Serbs, standing on the ruins of their short-lived empire, have won something more valuable than a battle. They have won a legend. The sun rises on June 16, 1389. The Ottoman army is gone. They have packed their tents, loaded their wounded onto wagons, and begun the long march back to the east. Bayezid has a throne to secure, and he cannot afford to be caught in hostile territory with a depleted force. The field is left to the locals. The villagers who didn't fight, the women, the old men, the children, creep out of the hills. They walk onto the plain of Kosovo Field. They are looking for fathers. They are looking for husbands. What they find is a landscape that defies comprehension. The chroniclers say the piled bodies were so dense that the rivers changed course, damned by the dead. But the true horror isn't in the number of corpses. It is in the silence of the aftermath. Serbia is quiet. It is the quiet of a house where the head of family has just died. There is no king. There is no army. The iron fist is rusting in the grass. The nobility, the entire governing structure of the state, has been wiped out in a single afternoon. In Kosovo, Princess Milica, Lazar's widow, waits for news. When it comes, it breaks her. Her husband is dead. Her father, Jug Bogdan, is dead. Her 9 brothers are dead. She is left alone to rule a country that is effectively a corpse. And then the bill arrives. A year later, the Ottoman envoys return. They are not bringing an army this time. They don't need to. They are bringing terms. The terms are the same ones Lazar rejected. But now the price has gone up. Serbia must become a vassal state. It must pay tribute. It must provide troops. But Bayezid demands something else, a personal price. He demands Lazar's teenage daughter, Olivera Despina. He wants the daughter of the man he executed to be his wife. Milica has no choice. To refuse means the total annihilation of the Serbian people. She agrees. In 1390, a solemn procession leaves Kruševac. The young Princess Olivera, accompanied by her weeping mother and a few surviving nobles, travels to the Ottoman court. She is handed over to Bayezid the Thunderbolt. She enters the harem of the man who killed her father. It is the ultimate humiliation. The symbol of Serbian purity is married to the symbol of Ottoman conquest. But history is strange. Olivera does not break. She survives. She becomes Bayezid's favorite wife. She uses her influence to protect what is left of her country. She whispers in the Sultan's ear, softening his rage, buying time for her people to breathe. And her brother, Stefan Lazarevic, Lazar's son, becomes the Sultan's most loyal general. This is the darkest irony of the post-Kosovo world. The Serbian knights who survived the battle, or the sons of those who died, became the elite shock troops of the Ottoman Empire. At the Battle of Nicopolis in 1396, when the Crusaders of Europe tried to drive the Turks out of the Balkans, it was Stefan Lazarevic and his Serbian heavy cavalry who charged in at the last minute to save the Sultan and crush the Christians. The men who died at Kosovo to stop the Ottomans ended up providing the Ottomans with the strength to conquer the rest of Europe. Serbia didn't just die. It was zombified. It was reanimated to fight for its killer. For the next 70 years, Serbia lingered on as a vassal state, slowly suffocating, until the Ottomans finally annexed it completely in 1459. The darkness descended. For 500 years, Serbia disappeared from the map. It became a province, a tax district, a source of Janissaries and grain. But while the state died, something else was being born. The myth. In the monasteries, the monks began to write. They couldn't record a victory, so they recorded a transfiguration. They took the military disaster of Kosovo and turned it into a spiritual triumph. They wrote that Lazar didn't lose because of tactics or numbers. They wrote that he lost because he chose to. They told the story of the gray falcon from Jerusalem. They told the story of the heavenly kingdom. They painted Lazar not as a failed prince, but as a Christ figure who sacrificed himself to wash away the sins of his people. And they painted the assassination of Murad not as a desperate act of terrorism, but as a holy deed. Miloš Obilić became the Serbian Achilles. Why did they do this? Why celebrate a catastrophe? Because when you are a conquered people, when you are living under the boot of a foreign empire, when your laws are gone and your kings are dead, you need a story. You need a reason to endure. The Kosovo myth became the DNA of Serbian survival. It was whispered in the villages. It was sung by the guslar players by the fire. It taught every Serbian child that they were not slaves. They were the children of the heavenly kingdom, waiting for the time to rise again. It preserved the nation in amber. But myths are dangerous things. They simplify the complex. They romanticize the horrific. If you strip away the poetry, the falcons, and the holy light, you are left with the reality of June 15th, 1389. You are left with the farmers. The thousands of nameless men who were pulled from their harvest. The men who stood in the shield wall with rusted spears. The men who were trampled by Bayezid's horses. They didn't get a choice from an angel. They didn't get a poem written about them. They didn't get a monument. They died terrified in pain miles from home, fighting a war they couldn't win for a prince who gambled their lives on a point of honor. History remembers Lazar. History remembers Murad. History remembers the assassins and the sultans. But the cost of history is paid by the people whose names are never written down. The Battle of Kosovo was the suicide of an empire. It was the moment the Balkans broke. It created a wound that has never fully healed, a trauma that echoed through the centuries, fueling wars, genocides, and revolutions right up to the modern day. It all started on that flat, dusty field, where the blackbirds still circle, waiting for the next time the armies gather. If this descent into the darkness of the medieval Balkans moved you, if it made you see the past not as a list of dates, but as a human tragedy, then we have done our job. Hit that like button to help this story reach more people. Subscribe to Dark History Untold for more narratives from the forgotten corners of the past.